Most people wait their whole lives for someone to choose them. Ethan did too, until one small choice changed everything. This isn't just his story. If you've ever felt invisible, it might be yours. Ethan Cole didn't look like someone who was struggling. He had the kind of face people trusted. Open, ordinary, easy to forget in a crowded room but easy to talk to in an elevator. He smiled when he was supposed to. He laughed at jokes he didn't find funny. He said, "No worries," while his stomach tied itself in knots. What people didn't see, what he never let anyone see, was the quiet storm inside him. The storm that started the moment he woke up and only softened when he finally fell asleep. What did they think of me? Did I say the wrong thing? Why didn't they text back? Was that silence a judgment? He lived as if the world were a mirror reflecting his worth back at him, and most days the mirror looked cracked. It began long before he could name it. When his fourth-grade teacher pinned a gold star on someone else's paper, Ethan decided that excellence had been assigned to other kids. When his older cousin made the basketball team and he didn't, he decided that he was almost good enough, which, in his mind, meant not good enough at all. His parents loved him, but they were tired people trying to pay bills, and their praise came in short sentences. He learned to feed himself on crumbs. By high school, he could walk into a cafeteria and find a seat without anyone noticing him. He told himself he preferred it that way. Then he went home and stared at his phone, hoping it would light up with a message that proved he belonged somewhere. Adulthood didn't fix any of it. He got a job in a mid-size marketing firm, the kind of place with a good coffee machine and a weekly all-hands where enthusiastic people clapped for slides. Ethan did his work well, then stayed late to redo it, even better, just in case. He watched louder colleagues take credit for ideas he'd hinted at softly. He watched invitations to after-work drinks float around him like balloons he couldn't catch. He watched other people raise their hands in meetings and say things that were obvious, and he wondered how they did it so easily, how they spoke like they deserved to be heard. At night, he replayed tiny moments on a loop. The way his boss's eyebrows had dipped when Ethan presented. The 2-minute gap before a friend replied, "Sounds good." The jokes in the team chat that didn't include him. He told himself these moments meant something huge, and he shaped his mood around them. He set his alarm for 6 a.m., promising that tomorrow he would be braver. Tomorrow he would speak. Tomorrow he would stop waiting. Tomorrow kept moving. The first crack in the pattern didn't look like a crack at all. It looked like another late night on his couch, scrolling through videos to numb his head. He swiped past a clip of a dog in goggles, past a comedian, past someone making a giant sandwich, and then a woman's voice pulled him to a stop. She wasn't whispering. She wasn't shouting. She had that clear, decisive tone that makes you sit up straighter. "If you have an instinct to act," she said, "you need to move within 5 seconds or your brain will kill it." He didn't know who she was in that moment. He would later. Right then, he only knew that the sentence felt like a finger tapping on the glass of his life from the outside. He replayed the clip. Again. Again. The words didn't get smarter, they just got heavier. 5 seconds. That was nothing. That was a breath. That was the time it took him to reroute himself into silence. He laughed, a short embarrassed sound in an empty room, because the truth of it was silly and terrifying. He did have instincts to act, every day, every hour. He just strangled them with thinking. He went to bed and stared at the ceiling until the city's hum softened a little. He thought about the email he'd drafted to a local nonprofit months ago asking to volunteer as a writer on weekends, the email sitting in his drafts with 3 different versions of the same apology on top. He thought about the idea he'd had for his team's next campaign and the way he'd nodded and let someone else pitch a safe version instead. He thought about the text he wanted to send to his sister telling her he missed her and was sorry they hadn't talked much lately. His chest tightened. His mind began to narrate all the reasons not to move. Then he did something he didn't recognize as courage at the time. He whispered to the dark, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. He sat up. He sent the email. He wrote the text. He jotted the idea with a note, "Bring this up tomorrow before the meeting." His hands were shaking. Nothing in the room changed. But he did. The next morning, the world looked suspiciously normal. The street smelled like rain. The barista spelled his name correctly for once. At work, his manager announced the agenda, a quick review, then brainstorming. Ethan waited for his heartbeat to slow, and it didn't, so he stopped waiting. I have a concept, he said, voice steadier than he expected. The room tilted toward him. He counted in his head because it calmed him. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. He spoke. He talked about reversing the campaign's angle, making the customer the storyteller, letting real people narrate their tiny wins. A colleague interrupted with a joke about budgets. Ethan would typically shrink then. He didn't. He said, "That's a fair point, here's how we keep it lean," and he kept going. No one clapped. No one fainted. But they asked him to make a quick deck for the afternoon, and that was not nothing. In his inbox, a reply from the nonprofit blinked. "We'd love your help. Are you free to chat this week?" He stared at the sentence like it was a riddle. He had spent months debating whether he was worthy to send an email. The world had answered in 10 words. He laughed again, this time from relief. Maybe the point wasn't whether they said yes. Maybe the point was that he had asked, and he hadn't died. It would be clean and satisfying to say that everything changed all at once. It didn't. Courage turned out to be a muscle he hadn't used in a long time, and when he started lifting even the smallest weights, it trembled. He still woke up on some mornings with a stomach full of bees. He still overthought texts and rewrote sentences and caught himself trying to make everyone comfortable. But now he had a lever to pull when the panic rose. He counted down and moved his feet before his brain could run its old program. And then life gave him a different test, one that wasn't about action at all. It was about letting go. A friend he'd known for years, let's call him Matt, had a habit of treating Ethan like an optional extra. Plans were always, maybe, responses always late. Ethan had accepted crumbs because he told himself something was better than nothing. One Friday, they were supposed to meet for lunch. Ethan had rearranged his work, told himself he was lucky to be included. 30 minutes before, Matt texted, running behind. Rain check. No apology. No new time. Ethan stared at the screen. He could feel his old instinct swirling, the excuses, the no worries, the totally fine, the suggestion of another day. He felt a pressure behind his eyes that had nothing to do with Matt and everything to do with years of training himself to be grateful for scraps. Scrolling numbly, he stumbled on the same woman's face again, Mel Robbins, and this time, the clip was different. "When people show you who they are," she said, "let them. When they don't invite you, let them. When they don't support you, let them. It's not about controlling them. It's about freeing you." The words settled like a quiet snowfall. He felt the click of a puzzle piece he didn't know he was missing. There it was, a rule for the moments when you don't move forward, you release. Let them. He typed a reply he'd never sent before. No problem. Take care. No suggestion. No reschedule. No pretending he was fine when he wasn't. Then he put his phone face down and walked out to get lunch alone. The sandwich shop was loud and bright. He sat by the window with a grilled cheese and tomato soup, and the first spoonful tasted like honesty. He wasn't angry. He wasn't dramatic. He was done spending red money from his heart on apartments that wouldn't house him. The let them shift started small. He stopped defending himself to people who were committed to misunderstanding him. He stopped proving his worth to people who kept misplacing it. When relatives questioned his choices, he answered once and then changed the subject. When coworkers gossiped, he didn't add his voice to the noise to feel included. When someone took 2 days to reply, he stopped matching their timeline with the same delay to look cool. He replied when he wanted to. He let other people's patterns be their patterns, not assignments for him to complete. Of course, it felt like loss at first. His world got quieter. Fewer pings on his phone. Fewer invitations that made his stomach hurt. But in the quiet, something else arrived. Space. Space to think, space to feel, space to hear his own voice when he asked himself what he actually wanted. He realized he'd been busy for years without being full. Now he was less busy, and somehow more alive. The nonprofit call was on a Wednesday evening. He sat at his small desk with a cup of peppermint tea and clicked, join. A woman named Priya introduced herself, then introduced the project, a series of profiles about ordinary people doing small, meaningful things in their neighborhoods. Ethan listened and felt warmth spreading inside him. He knew those people. He was those people. He wasn't the hero of epic tales, he was a witness to the magic in small, steady acts. He said yes before the call ended. He closed his laptop and smiled without an audience. Saturday morning, he met his first profile subject, a retired bus driver named Gloria who organized a weekly breakfast for kids in her building. She had a laugh that rattled the room and a way of telling stories that made time slow down. Ethan asked questions and listened, really listened, until the pen on his notebook could barely keep up. When he got home and wrote her story, he didn't feel the panic that usually arrived when he created. He felt a lift, like something inside him had cracked a window to let breeze in. The nonprofit published the piece on their blog with a photo of Gloria holding a tray of pancakes like a trophy. Comments appeared, neighbors, former students, strangers. I didn't know this was happening in my city. This made my day. Thank you, Gloria. Ethan read the responses and felt proud in a clean, quiet way. Not the pride that stands on tables and demands a medal. The kind that nods to itself and keeps going. At work, the Lean, Human First campaign caught momentum. The team shot short videos of real customers in kitchens and backyards and commuter trains, talking about tiny wins. The budget stayed sane. The numbers went up. In a meeting a month later, his manager said, "Ethan, solid thinking. Keep pushing this direction." It wasn't a parade. It was a sentence. It mattered. There were setbacks, because life doesn't stop being life just because you start living it more bravely. The company announced budget cuts. In the spring, people whispered in hallways. Slack went quiet. When the email with subject line, "Restructuring," arrived in his inbox, his throat went dry. He walked to a conference room and closed the door. He thought of all the times his worth had been tied to someone else's yes. He put his palms on the table. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, he said softly. He opened the email. His role wasn't eliminated. In fact, they were merging his project with another and asking him to co-lead the new team. He laughed out loud, half relief, half disbelief. Then he sat down and wrote a list of what he could control and what he couldn't. On the second list, he wrote in all caps, "Let them. Let leadership decide. Let the economy wobble. Let the uncertainty be uncertain." On the first list, he wrote, "Do my best work. Tell the truth. Take care of myself. Ask for what I need." Around the same time, he got a text from someone he hadn't heard from in months. A woman he dated briefly, the one who had liked him in soft focus and then gone out of frame when life got busy. "Hey stranger," the message said. "Been thinking about you." The words tugged at a place in him that used to be raw. He read them twice, then put the phone down and made an omelet. When he came back, he typed, "Wishing you well," and left it at that. He didn't owe the past another version of himself. He wasn't mad. He was done. He let her be exactly where she was, not in his life. If you had asked him then what had changed, he might have said everything and nothing. The city still smelled like rain after the subway. His job still required decks and deadlines. His friends still sent memes. But the organ that filtered his life had been replaced. He was no longer using other people's reactions as oxygen. He had his own supply. A small invitation arrived that he almost declined, a community storytelling night at a bookstore 2 blocks from his apartment. "Share a 5-minute true story," the flyer said. He told himself he didn't do stages. He told himself he was a writer, not a talker. He told himself all the stories were already taken. He said those things while his finger hovered over the sign-up link. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, he said. He clicked. The room smelled like paper and coffee. String lights were draped like a constellation across the ceiling. People in sweaters sat on folding chairs and smiled nervously at each other. Ethan stood in the back and told himself he could still leave. Then they called his name. He walked to the mic. The first thing he said was, "My voice shakes when I speak in front of people." The crowd laughed gently, the kind of laugh that says, "Same." He told them about the gold stars he didn't get and the texts he waited for and the years he spent shrinking, then about the woman on his phone screen who told him to move before his brain could stop him, and the other sentence about letting people be exactly who they are without making it a referendum on your worth. He told them about Gloria's pancakes and the way a tiny, yes, can build a whole new wing onto your life. He didn't try to be impressive. He tried to be real. When he finished, people clapped. A tall guy in a denim jacket hugged him awkwardly and said, "Thank you. I needed that." A woman with gray hair squeezed his arm and said, "Same." He walked home under the string lights of the actual night and smiled because he had done something scary and didn't need anyone to turn it into an award for it to count. Weeks later, his manager asked him to lead a workshop for the junior team about creative confidence. He almost laughed. "Me," he said, pointing at himself like a cartoon. "You," she said. "You've changed the way you show up. People notice." He went home and fought with his old self for a few hours. Who are you to teach? What if you stutter? What if they don't care? Then he did what he had trained himself to do. He wrote an outline that wasn't about being fearless but about being honest. He wrote, "Act before your brain cages the instinct." He wrote, "Let people be people and keep your energy for the work." He wrote, "Don't wait for the room to crown you, crown yourself and contribute." He didn't put Mel's name on a slide because he wasn't pretending these ideas were his inventions, but he honored where he'd learned them, from voices that reached through the noise and said, "Move, and release." The workshop wasn't slick. He made a joke that didn't land and a metaphor that tried too hard. But he looked the juniors in the eye and told the truth. One of them, a shy copywriter named Jude, lingered afterward. "I never speak in meetings," Jude said. "My ideas die in my notebook." Ethan nodded. "Mine did too," he said. "Try giving yourself 5 seconds of courage. It's long enough to get your hand up. It's long enough to unmute yourself. It's long enough to send the email." Jude looked at the carpet and then back up. "Okay," he said. "I'll try." A week later, Jude spoke up twice in one meeting. The ideas were good. The room listened. Ethan didn't take credit. He took joy. Through all of this, the world kept being the world. Someone cut him off in traffic. He shrugged. "Let them." A distant relative made a snide comment at a family gathering about real jobs. He smiled and asked if anyone wanted more tea. "Let them." A colleague tried to take a shortcut and asked Ethan to cover for it. He didn't get righteous. He said, "I'm not comfortable with that," and moved on. Let them. One evening in late summer, the nonprofit held a small event to celebrate the year's stories. They rented a community hall with mismatched chairs and a sound system that crackled when you turned it on. People filtered in with plates of homemade food. Gloria brought cornbread and hugs. Ethan stood near the coffee urn, listening to fragments of stories float by, about gardens and after-school programs and night shift kindnesses. The director asked Ethan if he'd be willing to read a short excerpt from one of his pieces. He said yes and chose 3 paragraphs about a neighbor who fixed bikes for free every Saturday, a man who kept a jar of spare screws like treasure. As Ethan read, he felt a tenderness spread through him. He wasn't saving the world. He was holding a lantern so people could see each other better. Sometimes that's enough. On the way home, he cut through the park. The air had that warm, cool balance that only happens in August, the trees whispering secrets to anyone who slowed down. He sat on a bench and looked at the life he was sitting inside. It was not glamorous. It did not belong in a movie montage. But it was his. He thought about the boy who stared at his phone waiting for belonging to arrive like a delivery, and he wanted to tell him, it's not coming to your door. You build it in your life. One small act. One brave sentence. One gentle release at a time. His phone buzzed. A message from his sister. Got your text. Sorry I've been Mia. Can we talk this weekend? He smiled and typed, absolutely. Years ago he would have written a novel of hurt and need. Now he just said yes. There was, finally, a night when the old ache tried to make a comeback. He was scrolling through social media, that bright carnival of everyone else's highlight reels, and he saw a group photo, his old coworkers at a rooftop party, arms slung over shoulders, the skyline a postcard behind them. He recognized the laughter even through pixels. He wasn't in the frame. He felt the familiar tug at his ribs, the "oh, so it's like that." He waited for the narrative to spool up. You weren't invited. You're forgettable. You don't matter. The old machine coughed and tried to start. He watched it. Let them, he said quietly into his living room. Then he closed the app and opened the window. The night air carried exactly 0 opinions about him. It felt like the kind of truth you can breathe. When the bookstore asked him back to tell a longer story, he said yes without bargaining with himself first. He wrote about learning to stop asking the world to choose him and learning to choose himself. He wrote about 5 seconds and about letting go. He wrote about pancakes and bike screws and the way ordinary people make a city gentler without asking for permission. The night of the event, the room was full. He stood at the mic and thought, my voice might shake. Then he said the sentence out loud. The crowd laughed softly again. He told the story anyway. Near the end, he looked up and saw a kid at the back, maybe 19, cheeks flushed, eyes bright and wet. Ethan felt something old and heavy unhook from his chest and float away. He finished. People clapped. Afterward, the kid came up and said, I thought I was the only one who felt like this. Ethan said, you're not, and meant it with his whole life. Later that week, he recorded a short video on his phone. He wasn't trying to go viral. He was trying to talk to the one person who needed to hear it the way he had once needed to hear it. He said, if you feel stuck, try giving yourself 5 seconds to act before your brain cancels you. And if people don't meet you where you are, let them. You don't have to drag anyone to your future. He posted it and put the phone away. The views crept up, then galloped. Comments arrived from screens he'd never see and faces he'd never meet. I spoke up today. I left a situation that was crushing me. I finally sent the application. He sat on his couch and let the miracle be ordinary, words traveling, courage catching. On a quiet Sunday morning, Ethan walked the long way to the market. A woman watering her stoop waved at him like they were old friends. He waved back. At the crosswalk, a man in a suit offered a stiff smile. Ethan smiled for real. The world wasn't different, not in any way you could measure with a yardstick. But he was different, and that meant his world was. He stopped by the river, where joggers pretended not to race each other and a toddler in a dinosaur hoodie demanded that ducks listen to his speech. Ethan leaned on the railing and thought about choice. Not the massive, movie poster choices. The tiny ones. Text or don't text. Speak or swallow. Stay or go. Ask or assume. Count down and move, or let the old program win. Release or cling. Build or beg. He had been taught to wait for someone to unlock the door of his life from the outside. It turned out the key had been in his pocket, ordinary and available, this entire time. He closed his eyes and whispered a sentence, not a prayer, not a manifesto, just a promise to himself. I am not waiting to be chosen. I choose myself. He opened his eyes and laughed, because he had written that months ago in a journal and tonight it felt true all over again. That's the thing about real change, it doesn't crown you once. It asks you to keep choosing, one unglamorous decision at a time. He walked home and made dinner and called his sister. He prepped a simple deck for Monday and sent Jude a quick note that said, proud of you for speaking up. He texted Priya that he'd found another neighbor with a story, an elderly man who fixed radios in a basement that smelled like tin and memories. He watered the plant he'd forgotten for years because he kept expecting it to thrive on neglect. It didn't. It needed water. He laughed at the metaphor and poured a little more. When he climbed into bed, he didn't reach for his phone. He lay there and listened to the city breathe. He thought about the boy who wasn't chosen for the team, the man who waited for texts, the colleague who said, no worries, while swallowing everything. He could feel those versions of himself like old coats in the back of a closet. He didn't hate them. He thanked them for surviving long enough to get him here. He let them hang there without trying to throw them out or put them back on. Let them. Sleep came like a tide, steady and kind. In the morning he would wake up and the world would be as messy and beautiful as ever. People would be late to things. Emails would arrive with subject lines that spiked adrenaline. Someone would forget to say thank you. Someone would surprise him with grace. The sky would do its sky thing. He would do his. And when fear raised its megaphone, he knew what to do. He would count down and move. When people's choices stung like nettles, he knew what to do. He would let them be theirs and keep his energy for the life he was building. Not someday. Not when the room finally crowned him. Not when the right person arrived to tell him he was enough. Now. In the tiny, ordinary minutes where real lives are made. If you're hearing this and waiting for the perfect moment, Ethan would tell you what he tells himself. There isn't one. There's just this one. Give yourself 5 seconds. Say the thing. Send the message. Step into the room. And when someone can't or won't meet you there, let them. Not out of spite. Out of love for your own future. The lights of the city blinked through his curtains like a code he finally understood. He smiled into the dark and spoke the numbers softly, not to magic anything into happening but to remind himself what he can already do. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, move. And where others hold back, explain less, convince less, beg less. Let them. By the time the sun pushed a thin line across his wall, Ethan had already made tomorrow lighter. Not by changing the world. By changing the way he moved through it. He didn't need to be louder than everyone else. He only needed to be louder than his own doubt for 5 seconds at a time. He woke up, made coffee, and stepped into a day that belonged to him.